my name is Beck and welcome to a review for Summer Night, the fourth Dresden book by Jim Butcher. I will leave my Dresden playlist linked down below. I have done a review for every book in the series so far and all of them are spoiler free, but let's get into what I thought about Summer Night. So while the plot in this book does start off with a murder, I found that this book really investigated Dresden as a character as well as the characters in the cast around him, rather than just focusing on the murder trial and the murder aspects as like the forefront of the plot. I'm not quite sure how to word exactly what I mean, but it felt like it was a B plot to Dresden's character A plot in the book. So it was like one then the other. Whereas in the past, it was more the murder mystery aspect to hook you and get you interested. But now we're more interested in Dresden as a character and what he does. So I think Jim Butcher has kind of shifted gears in Summer Night so that it became more Dresden at the focus rather than the murder mystery at the focus, because this really delved into a lot more of the lore and the world building, which I'll get to in a second, and had Dresden and Murphy in it as well. And that's what I really liked about this. So what is it actually about? Because I haven't mentioned that yet. This one opens with the murder of the Summer Night, which is the guy who's basically like the left hand of the queen of the summer court in the Fae world. So there is like an impending war between the Fae courts in here. Dresden inevitably gets stuck in the middle. He also has the ramifications of the vampire stuff from Grave Peril that he's still dealing with. And also in the beginning of this book, we finally get to meet the White Council, and they are just as infuriating as I imagined them to be. While the council was infuriating, Dresden does have a few allies, and so whenever he encounters somebody in the plot that actually likes him, because so many people don't, when he encounters something positive in the books and a character that he interacts with positively, I'm like, yes, and immediately more interested, because he's got very few people that he trusts and he trusts those few people implicitly. So whenever someone new gets introduced, I'm always way more invested in their relationship because I know that Dresden trusts them, so therefore I trust them. Now, the reason that I keep coming back to the books in the Dresden Files series have, yes, been the plot and yes, been the humour, but mostly at the core, it's been the characterization, and this book is what amped it up for me. And I didn't know if that was possible considering the way I felt about the last book and how much I loved that. I think that this book had brilliant follow through because of that last book, and I love that it developed not just Dresden but Murphy and some side characters as well. And I love seeing that trauma and that follow through because obviously it was important to the characters, obviously it's going to leave its mark, and I like that the book explored that. It felt realistic and it also grounded it really well, and it built more layers into Dresden's and Murphy's relationship, which is something that I've been wanting to see develop a lot, but I guess the series has had a lot of moving parts so far, and so now it's getting more settled and more grounded, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing get developed between these two. They're my two favourite characters of the series. And just further on the characterization for this, I loved seeing Dresden's grief. It was really clear in this book, and it didn't completely overshadow the book, but it delved deeply into it enough at the beginning in order for you to understand how prevalent it was in his life and how much it was affecting him, especially because other characters observed it from the outside and they were like, buddy, something's not right. And so I liked seeing that, and I also liked seeing the vulnerability of him, because we've seen his vulnerability a lot in the previous books, but this was more of an emotional vulnerability as well that he also shared with Murphy, and I loved that we got to see her grief and her vulnerability and the way that they interacted with that as well in here. I'm being very careful to tiptoe around spoilers here. I love that they could communicate their vulnerability without necessarily using words, with using gesture and just understanding each other's body language as well as words, and it just showed a deeper connection and a level of respect in their relationship. And again, that's something that I really loved seeing because it gave them a humanness that I really liked. Just to pivot on from the character development, there was an action sequence between these characters, and I just love the attention to detail in it that Jim Butcher has included, because Dresden was counting bullets, and so often in books or in TV shows and movies, I see characters shooting guns and they just have unlimited bullets. But in this one, he was like 4, 5, 6. Oh, I only have 1 or 2 left. So that just added a level of danger to the action scenes that we were witnessing, on top of the fact that we already care about these characters and we know that the author doesn't shy away from injuring characters at the heart of his series. So there was already that amount of fear in the book, and then this just added like a wildness and a tension on top of that fear in this scene. And then there is something that I also wanted to specifically spotlight or mention in this review, because it's been something that we've seen prevalent in the other books but not to the level that it was in this book, and that is the Fae, and they bring with them a lot of explicit sexual tension. And we've seen Dresden's perspective in the other books, and we're reading from a first person perspective for a man in like his 30s, however old he is. So we're going to see him get attracted to women quite a lot. And that didn't necessarily bother me in the previous books. It didn't bother me in this book, but it's been something that I've received comment on in my previous comments, not like in a negative way, but in a, hey, this is what I noticed way. And so I didn't really want to ignore it for this review. Not that I was ignoring it before, but it seems more prevalent in this one. So it made more sense to talk about it now. So Dresden tends to notice people very physically, and that is often described in women with their, what they're wearing, their breast size, their legs, their face, their lips. I've noticed that in his previous descriptions, and I actually didn't mind it so much because it actually is very true of Dresden's character. He's attracted to literally anybody he meets. Like, he is hopelessly attracted to people, and I think that description aligns with his characterization. But in one sense, I don't want to defend sexualization of women, but in the other sense, I think it's just what it is, and he notices people and is very hopelessly attracted to them. So I think there are two sections of this argument, and obviously it's not black and white, it's kind of grey and in the middle, but I like the fact that Dresden is self-aware of his hopelessness, and this book touched on Fae, and there was an awesomely hilarious scene in here with very cold water. So it is kind of self-aware, and Dresden is very hypersexual in his noticing of things, but it doesn't overshadow the story, and it doesn't overshadow things in a negative way, because he's also very consensual, he's very respectful as a character as well. So the way I read it is just that he's a horny man, really, and he has other things that take more of his personality than just that thing. So I don't personally think it's a harmful thing, but I'm just reading it from my perspective. Other people might read it differently, but I did want to mention it for this review just in case. So now let's just talk about my concluding thoughts, kind of the ending of this book. And I actually thought I saw something coming about the ending because it seemed fairly clearly signposted, but it was obviously signposted for a reason, so the reader picked up on it because it wasn't acted out in this book and I expected it to be. So it was nice to be surprised about the ending because that didn't necessarily play into it. Obviously, I'm still being vague for a reason, but I did like the ending. I want to say very clearly I did like the ending, but I think it wrapped up fairly neatly character-wise, and it seemed to tie things in a bow when I thought things would continue on. That said, though, I liked the way that this book revolved around hurt, not just from Dresden or Murphy's perspective, but from other characters as well. And it was a deep-seated hurt that drove people's actions. That's what the theme was around this book, and that's what I really liked about it. It really centered on Dresden's grief at the beginning, and then it included like a ripple effect or a follow-through through the rest of the book. And that is a theme that I really liked seeing because it made the characters, and even the characters that you didn't like, quite human. So unsurprisingly, I've given this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't the same impactful 5 out of 5 stars that Grave Peril was, because that kind of blew my mind. But this was not a quieter book, because Dresden is not a quiet character. It was a softer 5 stars than Grave Peril. I don't know how to explain that except to explain it subjectively in my head, and I can't really do that in a very clear way, so I'm just going to slap a 5 on it and leave it at that. But it was vulnerable, it was sad, it was grieving, it was multifaceted, which I loved. I love the characters in here. I wish certain things weren't tied up in this book in terms of emotion and character, but I think that was just for the sake of this ending, and hopefully it will be explored a little bit further later. I imagine it will, given that I've read the synopsis of the next book in the series now, so I could see that those feelings and those themes have not necessarily been laid to rest, which I like. So continuing to enjoy the series, obviously 5 out of 5 stars. I will be reading on for sure. I've gotten this far. Why would I stop now? I'm loving the audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll chat to you down in the comments, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye.